For those of you watching this back, make sure you pay attention. You may have heard me say these things before, but it's important to have it fresh in your minds before we get out there and do this work. When you're standing in the cube, make sure you're standing nice and straight like a statue the entire time. Your feet should be straight as well. So it's important that you're not standing with your feet pointed out like this. You'll look more professional. And it's important that while you're holding the screens, you're holding them from the bottom of the screens, not from the corners. That includes your thumbs. Have them on the bottom of the screens. You can actually grip the bottom of the screens, but just have them on the bottom and not on the corners. This is important for functional reasons as well as aesthetic reasons. The functional reasons are that you can flatten the screen a lot easier by pulling the bottom of the screen towards your body. And it's important that we have a flat screen because this reduces the glare, and it also makes it easier for tall and short people to see the screens. You need everybody to see these screens clear. It's also important if you want to adjust the angle of the screen, and the organizers with the red lanyards will be the ones that do that with you. We will make eye contact with you and we'll have our hands out like this and we'll adjust like this. So you just follow our hands and you'll know that you need to move the screen accordingly. And it's a lot easier to do that when you have your hands on the bottom of the screens. If you need to take a break, you raise your hand and just wait for an organizer with the red lanyard to come over, and we'll find someone. Just give us a couple of minutes to switch in with you. Don't move, don't take off your straps or anything until someone is ready to switch in with you. And if you see someone who hasn't been spoken to yet, raise your fist. And the outreach team needs to pay attention to this, and we'll go over and speak to that person as soon as possible. Give it at least 10 seconds and raise your fist so that you can help the outreach team to do our job better. All right? When it comes to outreach, please remember that when you're doing outreach, you need to circulate the area really well. Please don't stand around in clusters, and definitely don't socialize while you're here, because we are here to take serious action for the animals. We can socialize after these actions when we have dinner together or whatever. But while we are here, please maintain your focus on the outreach and reaching non-vegans and making them not only vegan, but activists, and maintain that goal in mind at all times, okay? While you're doing outreach, please remember the 3 principles that we have. The protocol is something I can't get into fully because you have to watch the masterclasses that are online. The latest one can be watched at onedamnmonth.com. Go and watch that ASAP. It's been up for about a week now, and we get really deep into the protocol and the principles that we have. But let me just summarize it for you into 3 principles. Number 1, we are not just here to give people education. We're not here to just raise awareness. We're not here to just inform people about what's going on to the animals. That is a very weak goal, and it's also condescending because a lot of people already have access to this information. What's missing in society is not the awareness about this issue. What's lacking is accountability. Even if they have seen this footage, and a lot of people have already seen this footage, they choose to ignore it. They choose to be complacent. So our job is to make sure we put them in the hot seat. We are there to make sure that they understand that they have a moral obligation and they are individually responsible for what's happening to these animals. Number 2, put them in the victim's position, because if you're not doing that, they will never understand the severity of this injustice. Just like with any injustice, we analyze it from the victim's point of view. And so, of course, people are not going to understand this unless they see it from the victim's position. So it's your job to do that. If they give you a ridiculous excuse, mirror that excuse back to them by saying, hang on a second, if you were in the victim's position and I use that line of logic to justify doing this to you, would you find that acceptable? And that's usually enough to destroy their arguments. It's easy to say all these things from the victimizer's point of view, isn't it? But when you analyze it from the victim's point of view, nothing is acceptable. None of these excuses are justifiable. Also remember that you should be speaking as if you were in the victim's position. Speak in the same way you would want to be represented if you were in the victim's position. And the 3rd principle is, what are you going to do about this today? This is a call for action. This isn't just food for thought. People will say things like, I will try, I'll think about it. Yes, I'm going to change, like this woman earlier. Yeah, I'm going to. Yeah, eventually. Yeah, I'll reduce. Yeah. These people obviously don't understand the urgency and the severity of this injustice. So again, you need to make sure you put them in the victim's position, principle 2, and principle 1. Hold them accountable for their individual responsibility. What I like to say is, if you were in the victim's position, if I was the one oppressing you, would you want me to eventually stop? Or would you want me to reduce how much I exploit you? Or would you want me to stop right now? How fast would you want this to end is the question we have in the flowchart, if you were in the victim's position. And that's usually the most that you can do with most people. And also remember, we cannot convince everybody to become vegan. Accept that. We are only here to convince people who are reachable. Most people you speak with today will not be reachable. Accept that. Humans are scumbags. We are here for the people who have integrity, who have character, who actually respect animals for real. And there are a lot of those people here. So not all humans are scumbags. That's the good news. Maintain your focus on those people. There are only 4 things you can control with how successful you are in your outreach. Number 1, what you say. Number 2, how you say it. Number 3, who you say it to. Because if you're not talking to someone who's reachable, you should not be wasting your time with that person. Remember our 3 strikes and you're out policy. If you go through 3 excuses with somebody and you've answered each of their excuses, and they're still not satisfied and they're playing the whataboutism game, or they just keep going around in circles with you, then you know that you're speaking to someone who's not reachable. Wrap it up by saying, look, this is going nowhere, and just move on, walk away from them. And that is a much stronger message that you can send to that person than having the perfect counter arguments. Because the message you're sending to that person is at least one time in their lives, a vegan wasn't willing to put up with their bullshit. Value your time, stay empowered, because if you give your power away to non-vegans, you will not want to do this work for very long, and we want you to be able to do this sustainably. Stay empowered, that is completely within your control. And the last thing that you can control is how long you talk about this for, because even if you are talking to people who are reachable, it's important that you remember that you need to make the message sound as simple as it actually is, so that they can adopt it as fast as possible and digest it as fast as possible. Isn't that what we want? We want them to become vegan now. We don't want them to think that they need to go home and research this for days and days and watch all these documentaries and stuff. That's not necessary. People get it instantly. We've had people do that here at One Damn Month. It's not a huge truth bomb necessarily to understand that you need to respect animals. You either respect them or you don't. You either want to be responsible for animals being exploited in the worst possible ways, or you don't. Simple truth. Please also remember to use the language exploitation far more than any of the other terms that you may use, such as suffering, abuse, killing. If you focus the conversation on exploitation, you actually cover the entire injustice. If you just focus on the killing, then you're not actually covering the breeding, you're not covering the raping, you're not covering the enslavements, you're not covering backyard chickens and all the other things that people love to get into. And if you do focus on exploitation, it will address the niche things such as, what about crop deaths, or you just stepped on an insect, so yeah, that justifies me going to a steakhouse somehow. We're not exploiting insects to grow broccoli. Do you understand what I'm saying? So when it comes down to how to be the most effective, we have found in our communication to focus on exploitation. Veganism means to reject animal exploitation. That's as simple as it is. Going by the original Leslie Cross definition in 1951. Being a human being who rejects animal exploitation. It's literally defined in one line. It's not more complex than that. This is how we need to explain it to other people. You might even want to ask people, what does the word vegan mean to you? And I guarantee you most people will say, oh, it's about not eating meat and it's about not eating cheese and eggs. They think it's about what you don't eat, which means they think it's a diet. And that's your job to correct that. This is not about a diet, and it's not about a restrictive diet at that. This is about rejecting animal exploitation. That's what it is, an ethical stance, a principle. And for those of you who are doing outreach, please make yourself available to be in the cube and keep those cubers fresh. All right? Let's go out there and kick some ass.